Today's reading is The Narrator from the Sexypedia Wiki. The narrator is, well, the narrator, and a major character of the 2011/2013/2022 video game The Stanley Parable. His role in the story varies with player decisions. He has no canon appearance whatsoever, but that didn't stop anyone. He is not to be confused with the other narrators on this wiki. His class is Tiamat, and his source is The Stanley Parable. Basic information. The narrator is a central character in the Stanley Parable. He starts off as simply a narrator, describing the actions of your player character, a man named Stanley. However, you as the player have no obligation to follow the story the narrator describes. He may say Stanley went to the left, but nothing is stopping you from going to the right, for example. The Stanley Parable has a multitude of endings depending on your actions, and the narrator has a wide range of emotions and narrative roles throughout. More information can be found on the Stanley Parable Wiki. Archetypes. Fourth wall blurring. The narrator knows Stanley is fictional, and sometimes comes close to realizing he's a fictional narrator himself. One ending of the game hinges on the narrator acknowledging you as not Stanley, and a real person. He also puts the player in a timeout if you try to access game cheats. This fourth wall blurring becomes much more overt in Ultra Deluxe. The narrator reminisces on the release of the Stanley Parable in 2013, even reading out real-world reviews of the game from journalism websites and Steam. He tries to continue the game's legacy by creating the Stanley Parable 2, a game inside a game that takes up most of your playtime in Ultra Deluxe. Angst. The narrator is just as powerless as Stanley, and gets very upset in endings where he's forced to realize it. He sounds close to tears watching Stanley die in this ending. Repeatedly damaging yourself is the only way to progress dialogue. What the narrator sees is, you're literally willing to kill yourself to keep me from being happy. And he struggles to accept the predestined nature of his existence as a game character in the confusion ending. The true ending of the game, the real person ending, ends with the narrator begging a playerless Stanley to move in a tiny broken voice. He gets some especially heavy angst in the Ultra Deluxe edition of the game with the skip button ending. In this ending, he creates a skip button that allows the player to skip forward in time whenever he starts rambling on too long. However, the skips become longer and longer each time, going from just a few short minutes to thousands of years, with the narrator being left completely alone between skips. His sanity slowly deteriorates and he ultimately just goes silent. Distinctive voice/British. Very much so. The narrator is voiced by British voice actor Kevin Brighting. He has a very smooth voice with a posh English accent, and the Stanley Parable simply wouldn't be the same game without it. Dominating. His character is basically built on this. He demands complete obedience from you and will sass, berate, or punish you for anything else. Non-human. Probably not human, considering he's a disembodied voice who has some level of direct influence on the world around you. He also occasionally refers to humans in third person, such as in the broom closet ending. They have fallen prey to any number of your countless human physiological vulnerabilities. It's indicative of the long-term sustainability of your species. Quotable catchphrases. This is the story of a man named Stanley. Oh, did you get the broom closet ending? The broom closet ending was my favorite! And Stanley was happy. And Stanley died again. And Stanley died again. And Stanley died again. In short, everything he says. Villain. Sometimes. It depends on player choice. The narrator is most obviously a villain in the countdown ending, where he decides to punish you not following the story with a nuclear bomb countdown, and then watches in sadistic glee while you try in vain to stop it from detonating. He is also an intimidating big bad figure just in general. Subverted tropes. All-powerful. It appears this way, as the narrator is the author of the story you play in, and he can rewrite it on a whim and do everything from opening doors, to erasing people, to writing in nuclear bombs. However, he is explicitly not in complete or total control, which is shown in the museum ending and the confusion ending. Fanon tropes. Gilf/white hair. More recent depictions of the narrator show him as an older man with gray hair, usually appearing to be in his 50s or 60s. John-locked. There are essentially two routes that shippers take with the narrator, shipping him with Stanley, who's more or less his OC who he can't write correctly, or crossover shipping him with rough sexy woman equivalent GLaDOS, a fellow voice in the wall snarking at the expense of a silent video game protagonist. White twink humanization/suit guy. Humanization is a strong word, considering the aforementioned ambiguity of his status as a person, but in any case, the narrator is often portrayed this way by fans. The twink part is not quite as universal as the white part, but it definitely happens. Fans frequently draw the narrator as a white, often skinny man in a nice suit. He is often portrayed wearing a headset or speaking into a microphone. Some fans took the tired writer aesthetic and fully sent it in their narrator portrayals, adding an aspect of relatability to him, especially to the fanfiction writers in the fanbase. Fanon. The Stanley Parable was released in 2011, meaning Tumblr had it bad for British accents at just the right time to give the narrator a nice popularity boost. For the same phenomenon on a larger scale, Portal 2 came out that same year, and the Tiamat-class sexy man Wheatley was so British.